Rain whispered against the glass walls of the penthouse, tracing silver veins down the view of the sleepless city. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and roses, an odd mix of hospital and home. Lily stood near the window, arms folded, watching the city pulse beneath her. Somewhere behind her, a soft mechanical hum marked the rhythm of the ventilator attached to the man she was now legally married to. Ethan Cole, the youngest self-made billionaire in the country, had once ruled boardrooms with words that could bend markets. Now, he ruled silence. His accident 6 months ago had stolen his ability to walk and nearly taken his will to speak. Their marriage was a contract, signed under fluorescent light and cold necessity. She needed money to save her father's failing clinic. He needed a wife to silence investors who thought his empire would crumble without an heir. They promised no love, no emotions, just appearances. But love, she was learning, doesn't always ask for permission. That evening, when she set his tray on the oak table beside the wheelchair, Ethan looked at her, not with pity, not with ownership, but with something painfully human. His voice came slow, fragile. "You keep forgetting I'm not glass, Lily," he said. "You don't have to handle me like I'll break." She froze. His tone wasn't harsh, yet it carried a weight she couldn't name. Maybe anger. Maybe longing. He tried to lift his hand. It trembled halfway before falling back. "I can't feel much below my chest," he murmured. "But that doesn't mean I can't feel you." The words slipped into her like a knife made of warmth, gentle, but deep. For the first time, she saw the man beyond the machines, the man fighting for a piece of his old dignity. Her heartbeat stuttered, unsure whether it was guilt or recognition that made her chest ache. Outside, lightning drew a fleeting picture of his reflection beside hers, two broken outlines sharing the same storm. She turned away, pretending to fix the curtains. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "It wasn't part of the deal." He smiled faintly. Neither was feeling alive again. For the next few moments, neither spoke. The ventilator's steady hiss filled the silence like background music to an emotion neither dared name. Lily's throat tightened. She had lived years hiding behind calmness, but his stillness unnerved her more than any chaos could. Her eyes wandered to the documents on the shelf, the contract, the schedule, the money that would soon clear her father's debts. Everything was supposed to be simple. Until he said those words. Until she began to care. When she helped him adjust the blanket, their hands brushed, skin against skin, heartbeat against machine rhythm. It lasted a second, but something in her broke and rearranged itself all at once. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city, let's see how wide kindness still spreads." That night, Lily sat alone on the balcony, clutching her phone as raindrops slid between her fingers. She scrolled through messages from creditors, from hospital staff, from the past life she was trying to save. Nothing felt real anymore. Except his eyes when he said those words. She remembered the way he used to be on television, confident, untouchable, always surrounded by lights and applause. Now he was a shadow of that man, yet somehow more human than ever. In her chest, a quiet war began, between duty and compassion, between survival and something dangerously close to affection. The city below roared with traffic and thunder, but up here, time slowed. Every heartbeat sounded like a question. What if kindness can turn into love, even when it's forbidden? Lily exhaled softly, unaware that in another room, Ethan was still awake, listening to the rain, hoping she would come back inside. And when she finally did, drenched, trembling, and silent, his eyes lifted to her as though she was the first sunrise after a very long night. She stood at the doorway for a long time, her wet hair clinging to her face, the sound of the rain muffled behind her. Ethan's eyes followed her every move, not out of control, but with quiet wonder, like he was memoizing proof that she still existed here, in this room that had forgotten warmth. Without a word, she crossed the floor, took a towel from the side table, and started drying her hair. Water dripped onto the polished marble, catching the dim light of the bedside lamp. The scent of rain mixed with antiseptic again, strange yet familiar. Ethan finally broke the silence. "You went out there without a coat again." She smiled faintly, avoiding his gaze. "It's just rain, Ethan. Not everything has to be controlled. He looked down, the muscles in his jaw tightening. I used to think that too. Until the day control was all I had left. There was something in his tone that made her chest tighten. She wanted to say she understood, but she didn't. Not really. She hadn't lived in a body that betrayed her, hadn't woken up one morning to find everything that defined her gone. So instead, she whispered, I'm sorry. He laughed softly, a sound that was half warmth, half ache. Don't be. Just talk to me like I'm still human. Her throat caught. She turned to face him, really face him this time. His hands rested uselessly on the arms of the wheelchair, his eyes sharp and alive even while his body stayed still. I never stopped, she said quietly. You just stopped listening. The words escaped before she could stop them. A line drawn without thinking, between who they were pretending to be and who they might still become. He blinked, surprised. Then smiled, small, but real. I missed that, he said. The part of you that doesn't fake politeness. Her cheeks warmed. Maybe you just bring it out of me. Lightning cracked again, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended, two souls standing at the edge of something they couldn't name. She walked toward the kitchen, but before she could leave, he said softly, Lily, thank you. For staying. The words stopped her mid-step. She didn't answer, only nodded slightly before disappearing into the soft hum of the house. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. The next morning arrived in golden quiet. Lights spilled across the room, touching the oxygen tubes and machines with a kind of reverence. Lily walked in carrying breakfast, black coffee for herself, oatmeal for him. He was already awake, reading something on his tablet. Business reports, stock values, fragments of the world he refused to abandon. You still keep up with all this? She asked, setting the tray down. I built it, he replied simply. Losing my legs doesn't mean I lose my mind. She admired that, the fight still alive in him, the refusal to fade. But beneath it, she sensed something deeper, fear. He caught her stare. You're wondering why I care so much, aren't you? A little. Because it's all I have left to prove I still matter. The words hung heavy between them. She didn't know what to say, so she just poured his coffee and placed it within his reach. He tried to lift it, but his fingers trembled again. She stepped forward quickly, steadying the cup with both hands. Their eyes met over the steam. For once, no masks. Just quiet, human fragility. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that neither contract nor money could define. That morning blurred into afternoon. Rain clouds had rolled away, leaving behind a soft sunlight that painted the penthouse in shades of gold. Lily sat on the balcony, folding paperwork from her father's clinic, unpaid bills, overdue supplies, desperate letters signed in shaky handwriting. The weight of the papers felt heavier than the wind pressing against them. Inside, Ethan's voice drifted from the study, calm, measured, alive again. He was dictating something to his assistant through a voice module, negotiating contracts, steady as if nothing had ever broken him. It almost amazed her, how his willpower filled the room even when his body couldn't. She caught her reflection in the glass, tired eyes, hands trembling. For a long time, she'd thought of him as just another obstacle in her survival, the deal she had to endure. But lately, every time he spoke, something in her softened. Maybe because he spoke less like a CEO and more like a man learning how to breathe again. When he called her name, she entered quietly. He looked up, sunlight tracing the faint scars near his collarbone. You've been sitting out there too long, he said. I needed to think, she replied. About leaving? Her silence answered him. He smiled faintly, the kind that hides sadness under calm. You should. You've paid your debts in ways I never expected. She frowned. You don't mean that. He exhaled slowly, his fingers twitching against the wheelchair armrest. Lily, I know why you married me. You saved your father. I'll never hold that against you. But I can't be the reason you stop living. Something inside her snapped, not in anger, but grief. She knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. You think I haven't tried to leave? Every time I walk toward that door, I remember your voice that night. The way you said," she hesitated, "that you still feel me." Ethan's eyes softened. He looked at her as if those words were both curse and salvation. Then maybe I shouldn't have said them. Her heart stung. "No," she whispered. "Maybe I needed to hear them." He closed his eyes, the sunlight catching the moisture there. The silence that followed was louder than thunder, the kind of silence that changes people. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Later that evening, Lily stood by the piano, untouched since Ethan's accident. Dust glimmered across its black surface. She lifted the cover and brushed her fingers along the keys, hesitant. He used to play here once, before the crash. Before everything stopped. "Play something," his voice came from behind her. She turned. "You still remember?" "I never forgot." She sat, her hands trembling. The first notes came uncertainly, fragile like a wounded bird learning to fly again. The melody filled the space between them, not perfect, but real. Ethan listened, his lips parting slightly as if every sound carried an old ghost back to life. When the last note faded, she looked up and found him smiling, quietly. "That song," he said. "I played it the night I met you." She blinked. "You remember that?" "How could I forget?" His voice cracked. "You wore a blue dress, and you laughed at a joke I never finished because I couldn't stop watching you." Her throat tightened. She remembered too. That night before tragedy struck. That night when he was just Ethan, not a billionaire, not a broken man. Just someone who looked at her like she mattered. The realization hit her all at once. Maybe fate didn't trap her here. Maybe it was bringing her back. The next day, dawn broke quietly, pale sunlight spilling through the wide glass panels, catching in Ethan's hair as he dozed in his chair. Lily had fallen asleep nearby on the couch, a blanket half-slipped from her shoulders. The piano still stood open, its keys like a half-told secret between them. Ethan stirred first. His eyes opened to the sight of her asleep, her head tilted against her arm, her expression soft, nothing like the woman who once avoided his gaze. He didn't move, didn't want to break the fragile peace. For a man who had lost so much, this moment, simple, human, felt like a kind of miracle. When Lily woke, she found him watching her. "You should have called me to your room," she said, rubbing her eyes. He smiled faintly. "And ruined the first quiet morning we've had in months." She laughed under her breath, but the sound carried warmth. For the first time since she moved here, the house didn't feel like a cage. It felt lived in. Later that morning, she made breakfast, something she hadn't done for him before. As the smell of toast filled the kitchen, Ethan rolled closer, his chair's hum breaking the silence. "You're cooking," he teased softly. "Is that allowed in our contract?" She turned, butter knife in hand. "I added a new clause, kindness." He chuckled, but then his tone grew quieter. "Careful, Lily. That's how hearts start breaking." Her hand froze for a moment. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she didn't see the billionaire, or the patient, or the man she pitied. She saw someone scared to be loved again. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." That afternoon, Ethan asked her to help him to the terrace. She hesitated at first. It was a long time since he'd wanted to go outside. But he insisted. The elevator doors opened to sunlight and the gentle hum of city life far below. He took a slow breath. "I forgot what wind feels like." Lily pushed his chair closer to the edge where glass met sky. "It still remembers you," she said softly. He smiled, eyes distant. "Do you ever think about before?" "Every day," she admitted. "But I also think about now. About what's left." He turned his head, watching her. "And what is left, Lily?" She hesitated. "Maybe something worth saving." A gust of wind brushed past, lifting her hair. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. No walls, no contracts, just truth suspended between them. He whispered, "You don't have to save me." Her voice trembled. "Maybe I already am." A quiet past that said more than words could. The city stretched endlessly below, but up here, there were only two souls learning to breathe again. That evening, when she tucked a blanket over his lap, he caught her hand and held it. Weakly, but with intent. "Lily," he said, "if I ever get to walk again, the first place I'll go is wherever you are." She looked down at him, her heart both breaking and healing at once. "Then you better start practicing soon," she whispered with a trembling smile. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounds like remembering how to live. Days passed quietly after that, each one softer than the last. The air in the penthouse changed, laughter began to echo faintly through the halls again, mixing with the mechanical hum of the machines. Lily found herself lingering longer by his side, bringing in small things that reminded him of the world beyond his glass walls, the smell of jasmine from the garden, the sound of street musicians below, the warmth of sunlight through sheer curtains. Ethan noticed every detail. "You're trying to make this place feel alive again," he said one morning, watching her place fresh flowers on the table. She smiled gently. "Maybe it's working." "It is," he replied, his gaze lingering. "Because you're here." She looked away, her heart caught somewhere between joy and guilt. "You should be careful saying things like that," she said softly. "Why?" "Because someone might believe you." He tilted his head slightly, his voice quiet. "Then let them." The silence that followed was deep and sweet, not awkward, but heavy with something neither could define. She turned to pour his tea, pretending her hands weren't trembling. Then, the intercom rang. Dr. Patel, Ethan's physician, had arrived for a checkup. As Lily stepped aside, the doctor examined him, testing reflexes, muscle tension, and neural response. After a long silence, Patel looked up with cautious optimism. "There's been progress," he said. "Slight nerve reaction. If you keep the therapy consistent, walking again might not be impossible." Ethan's breath hitched. "You mean?" "It's a long road," the doctor interrupted, "but yes, a real one." Lily's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She looked at Ethan, the disbelief, the fire rekindling in his gaze. For a man who'd spent months trapped in stillness, that single spark meant everything. When the doctor left, Ethan stayed silent for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You did this." She blinked. "Me?" "You brought back something I thought was gone forever, hope." Her throat closed. She wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't her, but the way he said it left no room for doubt. He reached out slightly, fingers brushing hers. "I don't know what you see when you look at me, Lily, but when I look at you, I remember who I used to be." Her eyes burned. She couldn't look away. "Then keep looking," she whispered. For the first time, his smile reached his eyes. "If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't." That night, she stood by the piano again, playing the same melody he once loved. This time, he joined her, not with hands, but with words. His voice carried the lyrics softly, broken yet beautiful. "Every day you stay, I learn how to live again." Her fingers slowed, her heart trembling with every note. She turned to him, tears catching the light. "Ethan." He shook his head gently. "Don't stop. Please. This is the only time I forget the pain." She continued playing, and for a fleeting second, it felt like they were whole. No wheelchairs, no contracts, no broken promises. Just two people who found each other in the ruins of what life had taken. When the song ended, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I wasn't saving you, maybe I was saving myself." He stared at her then, the kind of stare that said everything words couldn't. And outside, the rain returned once more, gentle, cleansing, almost like the world itself was trying to heal alongside them. The next morning came with a quiet kind of hope. For the first time since his accident, Ethan asked to be taken to the rehabilitation room, the one he had avoided for months. The walls smelled faintly of dust and antiseptic, mirrors reflecting empty parallel bars he once called his enemies. Lily wheeled him inside, her hands steady but her heart trembling. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked. He looked at the metal bars, then at her. "No," he admitted. But if I wait to stop being afraid, I'll never start. She smiled, that rare kind of smile that was both proud and terrified. Then I'll be right here. The therapist entered and adjusted the harness, gently securing him upright. His arms shook, sweat breaking across his forehead even before the first step. Lily stood in front of him, her voice calm, soft. One breath at a time, Ethan. He tried. The first attempt failed. His legs gave out immediately, his body collapsing back into the chair. The sound of metal clanged through the room, echoing like a cruel reminder. Again, he said through gritted teeth. The therapist hesitated, but Lily nodded firmly. He can do it. They tried once more. This time, he stayed upright for a second longer, a single heartbeat suspended between despair and victory. When he fell again, he didn't curse. He just laughed, breathless. That's progress. Lily's eyes glistened. She wanted to cry, but instead she knelt before him, gripping his trembling hands. You did it, she whispered. Even 1 second, that's enough for today. He looked at her, exhausted, his voice hoarse. You're the only reason I even tried. Her throat tightened. Then keep trying, not for me, for you. The therapist stepped out quietly, leaving them in the hum of the machines. Lily helped him back into his chair, her hands still shaking. When she turned to clean up, Ethan's voice stopped her. Lily, he said softly, do you think you could forgive someone who pushed you away when you tried to love them? Her heart stilled. She turned to him slowly. Is that what you think you did? He nodded faintly. I made it easy for you to hate me. I told myself it was mercy. Maybe it was cowardice. She walked closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it was pain. And maybe, I already forgave you the moment I saw how much it cost you. Ethan's eyes shimmered. For a long second, he couldn't speak, and for the first time, silence didn't feel like a prison. It felt like peace. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never, if it would break you too deeply. That evening, the city lights twinkled like a scattered constellation outside. Lily sat beside him, resting her head on the arm of his chair. He ran his fingers, still weak but alive, through a strand of her hair. I used to think being strong meant never needing anyone, he said quietly. Now I think it means allowing someone to stay. She smiled against the sound of the rain. Then you're stronger than you know. He exhaled slowly, his eyes tracing the skyline. Lily, if I could change one thing, it wouldn't be the accident. She lifted her head, puzzled. Then what? That I wasted so much time not saying what I feel. Her lips parted, her heart racing, but she didn't interrupt. He looked at her, the glow of city lights reflected in his eyes. I need to learn how to walk again, but I think I already know what it feels like to fall. Her tears came without warning. She leaned forward, taking his hand in both of hers. Then let's fall together, just this once. He smiled through the ache. Just this once. And for the first time in months, the machines hummed in rhythm with a heartbeat that finally felt alive again. The days that followed were different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had learned to breathe again. Ethan's therapy continued every morning, and Lily was there for every trembling step, every fall, every fragile victory. The bruises on his knees no longer meant defeat, they were proof of motion, proof of life returning piece by piece. One afternoon, when sunlight spilled like honey across the floor, Ethan managed to take 3 full steps before collapsing into Lily's arms. She caught him, breathless, her laughter breaking into tears. You did it, she whispered, her voice shaking. You actually did it. He looked at her, chest heaving, eyes bright with disbelief and pride. Then maybe I'm finally earning the right to stand beside you. Her heart clenched. Ethan, you already do. In that fragile moment, something in both of them shifted, the quiet acceptance that love had been building between them all along, unspoken but undeniable. Later, as they sat on the terrace, the wind tangling through her hair, Ethan spoke again. You know, he said, his voice low, when I was lying in that hospital bed, I thought I'd never be more than a shadow of who I was. But you, he paused, searching for words. You made me remember what light feels like. Lily turned to him, tears stinging her eyes. And you made me remember that broken doesn't mean unworthy. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world outside vanished. No contracts, no pity, just two hearts meeting in the quiet honesty of survival. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he brushed her cheek. You think I can't want you like this, he whispered. You're wrong. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. Then prove it. Want me, for who I am, not because I stayed. Ethan smiled, a soft, trembling smile that carried years of pain and new courage. I do. Every day I wake up and see you, I want to be better, not for myself, but because you believed I could. Her tears fell then, silent and heavy. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. The city lights blurred behind them, 1,000 tiny witnesses to something sacred. If you believe love still wins, comment in. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. That night, they didn't speak much. Words felt too small for what filled the air between them. Lily stayed beside him as he dozed off, her hand resting lightly over his. The machines hummed in soft rhythm, like lullabies built from second chances. Outside, thunder rumbled far away, gentle this time, like an echo of an old storm finally fading. She looked at him, at the man she once thought she'd never love, and whispered into the quiet, "You never needed to stand to make me fall for you." He stirred slightly, a faint smile touching his lips even in sleep. And for the first time since the day they signed that cold, empty contract, Lily realized it wasn't paper binding them anymore. It was love, imperfect, scarred, but real. The next morning would bring new trials, new steps, maybe new pain. But tonight, hope had already won. Morning sunlight stretched lazily through the room, painting everything in soft gold. Ethan stirred first, his eyes fluttering open to the quiet sight of Lily still asleep on the couch nearby, her hair falling over her face, her hand still loosely holding his. For a while, he just watched her, memorizing the peace that had finally replaced all those months of storms. When she woke, he was already sitting upright in his wheelchair, a faint but determined smile on his face. "You're early," she said, voice rough from sleep. "I couldn't wait," he replied. "Today feels different." She blinked. "Different how?" He nodded toward the parallel bars near the corner of the room. "Because today, I'm going to walk." Her heart leapt, both hope and fear colliding at once. "Ethan, maybe wait for the therapist." He shook his head gently. "I've waited long enough." She hesitated, then smiled softly. "Then let me be your wall if you fall." He smiled back. "You already were." With her help, he positioned himself between the bars. His hands tightened around the cool metal. His arms trembled, legs sluggish but alive. One breath in. One step. His right foot moved, slow, uncertain, but real. Then another. Lily gasped, covering her mouth. "Ethan." He looked up at her, his breath shallow, voice cracking. "You were right. Broken doesn't mean unworthy." She rushed forward, her hands hovering near his waist without touching, afraid to break the moment. Tears blurred her vision as he took another step, and another, until he collapsed into her waiting arms. They stayed like that, clinging to each other, trembling, half laughing, half crying. The sound of their breath mixed with the quiet hum of the machines, and for the first time, that sound wasn't tragic. It was triumphant. Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I told myself I'd walk toward you one day," he whispered. "I guess I finally kept my word." Lily smiled through her tears. "You didn't just walk, Ethan. You carried both of us." He chuckled weakly. "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't disappear when I can finally catch up." Her lips trembled, but her answer came like a vow. "Never." They stayed there in the quiet sunlight, two souls who had been strangers by contract, now bound by something deeper than law or sympathy. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Ethan returned to the terrace weeks later, walking slowly, without crutches this time, the wind wrapping around him like an old friend. Lily stood nearby, arms folded, tears in her eyes and pride in her smile. He looked out at the city and said softly, "You know, I used to think wealth was about what I could own." She stepped beside him. "And now?" He smiled, turning to her. "Now I know it's about who I can stand beside, and who stood beside me when I couldn't." She reached for his hand. "Then you're the richest man alive." He laughed quietly, his thumb brushing over hers. "Only because of you." The city roared below them, but up there, everything was still, hearts, sky, time itself pausing long enough to remember what healing looked like. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering, "We made it." Ethan looked at her, eyes glistening, voice a soft promise. "No, Lily. You made me." And as the sunlight broke through the clouds, painting them in gold, their story, born of pain, debt, and impossible odds, finally settled into peace. Moral warmth. Sometimes love doesn't arrive to complete us, it arrives to rebuild what the world tried to break. Because even a heart that's paralyzed can still move someone else's soul.